Good morning, Badger Nation. It's good to have you on the town hall again this week, and we're very excited about what we have planned today. As announced, we are planning on having Senator Mitt Romney join us in just a few minutes. As we're working with his staff in Washington, D.C. and here in Utah, we've been told that he is going to join us. We're having some technical issues on that, but at the same time, there's also an important vote that he has to weigh in on. So I think we're just going to have to be able to sort of dance with this and shift gears once they're ready. In the meantime, I just want to maybe set the agenda for the hour that we have with each other. I also want to, again, welcome those that are on the panel with us today. Really could have our regular cast of characters, Provost Melanie Jenkins, Vice President Carson Howell, Associate Vice President Terry Clausen. We've got also Vice President Stacy McKiff, and also Director of HR Josh Hales. So while we are sort of waiting, I'd like to make a couple announcements. I'd also like to sort of introduce the senator, so we can get that out of the way, so that once he's on with us, that we essentially have a maximum number of we have a maximum amount of time that we can spend with him. Well, hello. We do have the senator with us in a very unconventional sort of way. Welcome, Senator Romney. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Well, it's such a pleasure for us to have you with us, and thank you for taking some time with Snow College today. We know that you are going to be bouncing back and forth with an important vote, so we will respect that. And we're one thing that we're really known for here in Badgerland is we're quick on our feet, so we'll be able to sort of dance with you on this. So welcome, and just those that are listening. This is a guy who doesn't really need an introduction at all, but we all know that he is one of our newest senators here in the state. He occupies a lot of important seats when it comes to committee work, but one in particular we're going to spend some time with him on is his work on small business and entrepreneurship committees. As we know, he's a former governor of Massachusetts and a co-founder of Bain Capital, and really just a terrific person, and we're just so happy that you're with us. So, Senator Romney, how are things going in Washington, D.C.?
It's an interesting time. I'll put it that way. Very turbulent right now. Thank you.
Well, listen, one of we've got a couple of things that we'd like to engage you on, and then in the end, we actually have a couple of political science students that want to ask you a couple of questions. But you're listening to what we have is a regular bi-monthly town hall where we engage our campus, our students, our local community members, and that's who the audience is today. And one of the things we're very interested in, it's a really important agenda item for Snow College, is economic rural development. And one thing I need to tell the listeners, that one thing I've really appreciated about Governor Romney is he very early on in my presidency, he called me personally and spoke to me about and congratulated me on this position. But he really had an important message to me, and that was how important, rural development is. So, Senator Romney, let me just sort of ask you a question about how important is rural economic development to your agenda as senator? And how do you sort of see Snow College as a frontline institution on the rural urban divide? What are some of the roles you think we should be taking on to help fulfill that mission?
Thank you, President Cook. I didn't realize it was you until you made that connection, because I can't see you. I'm looking into Kelsey Berg's cell phone right now, but hopefully you can see and hear me okay. I'm happy to chat with you about economic development in rural communities and in more depth. But I know there are a number of branches that people think will be important for economic development in our rural communities. One is, we want to attract a factory of some kind to come to our community. And I'm happy to describe how it is people think about where to locate a factory, but I would note that that's generally a real long shot. That companies are not inclined to build facilities to manufacture something in rural America, in part because there are lots and lots of places across the country that already have empty factories. Factory jobs are going down nationally, manufacturing is going down nationally, and building a new facility in a new place is just not something which happens very often. Then there's a question of could we get a healthcare facility or another educational facility? Those, of course, depend upon the local population, and typically those are already being relatively well served. And then you come down to another option for economic development in rural America, and that is to have the state locate some of its state offices in rural parts of the state. And that's something I have been encouraging in Utah for some time, which is saying don't continue to put state offices along the Wasatch Front. Put state offices in other communities, rural communities in our state, so we can spread out the economic vitality that's associated with those state offices. But the real key, in my opinion, to successful economic development in rural America is associated with the incubators, if you will, of new ideas and new businesses, which are effectively our colleges and universities or our branch universities in our various rural communities. The real answer to, in my view, to economic development in rural America is the people who want to live in rural America, who are going to school at Snow or other colleges or extension programs in other rural communities, as they develop ideas for business startups that they have an incubator they can go to. And perhaps that's a retired person who's been a successful business person in the community, or perhaps just a faculty member, but someone who can capture those ideas and help wade through the process of actually beginning a business. Now, some businesses are started relatively easily. People can start them on their sofa at home. Other businesses are more complicated to begin and will require capital and personnel and so forth. But I really do think that if you look across the country at successful economic development in rural American communities, you'll find that oftentimes, and perhaps more often than any other single source, are the incubators that are associated with institutions of higher learning. So my view is that's the particular usual role that Snow College could play, and hopefully it can do it successfully.
So I understand you only have about 10 minutes. So we've got a couple of questions that we would like to ask you, and in fact I can ask Dr. Hood if he's got those student questions. But there's a question related to COVID. It said, given the 2020 election, this is one of our faculty, COVID and the volatile economy, what is the future of the Republican Party, and do you see yourself leading the Republicans in the brave new world? That's a good question. How would you answer that?
Well, I'm not in a position to lead the Republican Party in 2020. I will be one of many voices. I think President Trump will anticipate leading the party even in the next 4 years, and may actually decide to run for re-election in 2024. So the party will be pulled in many different directions, and different people have different views about what the direction might be that it would pursue. And I happen to be one of those that believes that the things we've stood for in Utah as a Republican Party are things that would be helpful in the National Republican Party. So, for instance, I happen to be a fiscal conservative. I believe we should try and balance our budget and reduce the amount of debt we have. That is not something we've been focused on the last 4 years. I think it should be part of our agenda going forward. I also think that we should continue the agenda that's been pursued ever since the Second World War, which is that we should encourage the spread of democracy in the world. And the reason for that is quite simple, which is that when authoritarians rule various nations, the likelihood of war breaking out is greater. And ultimately, these wars may suck us into them. And the world is a more stable place, more peaceful place, and by the way, more economically prosperous for us if the world is led by democracies as opposed to authoritarian nations. And so I'm one of those that believes that we should stay involved in the world and in the institutions of the world, encouraging them towards a direction which is conducive to democracy. I'd also say that I believe our party ought to stand, as it has in the past, for the principle that character counts, that we expect people who get elected to office to abide by standards of character that we would want our kids to emulate. So whether those principles or others are ones that I'm able to bring to our party, I can't tell you, but I do know there's some others that I think are important. I happen to believe that climate change is real. I hope that there's something we can do about it. And if so, I would like to see our party not just say it's a hoax, but instead say it's real and that we want to find solutions. I think the solutions are going to be technological, as opposed to getting people to use less energy, finding instead new sources of energy and new ways to use our devices and so forth. So those are at least some of the ideas that I have, and I'll be fighting for. And I will not be alone in that fight. But I think the wing of the party I represent is a pretty small wing, if you will. It's a triceratops arm these days.
I know you've got about 1 minute, and I want to get a question from a student. And here's her question. Your job is very difficult, Senator, and you've done, you've got criticism as well as you've done a great job continuing to move ahead. But what makes you push forward when you feel like things are hopeless? This is a really, I think, telling question for many of our students who often are struggling with stress and depression. And so what kind of advice would you give this student who may be struggling right now?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. That is, I think people have to stop and say, what's the most important thing in your life? And you judge grades or money or career as the most important thing in your life, you're bound to be unhappy, because those things are oftentimes not entirely under your control. Sometimes bad things happen, and you get frustrated. Sometimes you don't have all the skills you want to be able to accomplish what you'd like to do from a worldly standpoint. And that's just the reality of how life is. But fortunately, the real currency in life is not those things. The most important thing in your life is something you're going to have to decide. But in my own view, the most important thing in my life is my relationship with my family, my relationship with my God, and the friends that I have. And I have said frequently that I think the real currency in life is the people that you love, the friends you have. That's the currency of life, not dollars and cents or position. And if you take a deep breath and say, okay, what's important to me? Friends, the people I love, my family, my faith. Those are things that are entirely in your control. They're not controlled by good luck or serendipity. They're not controlled by whether you have an IQ of 100 or an IQ of 130. And focusing on those things allows you to be successful based upon your own capacity, rather than what someone else decides for you. So that would be my advice. It's the advice that I give to myself as I work here, which is I'm often frustrated. I don't get done what I'd like to get done. I can't win all the elections I run for, but I recognize that the most important things in my life are the people I love and the friends that I have.
Thank you, Senator, for your time. We hope that we can get you down to Ephraim and Richfield and show you God's country down here. And we wish you all the best with your work back there.
Thanks so much. I've got to run. Sorry to have to leave you like this, but I got a critical vote I got to go take care of.
Understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, we also want to thank Kelsey Berg and the senator's office. Thank you, Kelsey, for making those arrangements. We really, really appreciate it. There's some really terrific questions, by the way, that if we had time, we would have asked. I just want to, so for example, one here was Judge Amy Barrett has received criticism from some of, his colleagues in the Senate for making decisions based on her religious conviction. how have the decisions you've made as governor and senator been influenced by your faith? That would have been a really interesting one. There were others here. Yeah, what do you think the best way to deal with the rising number of COVID cases and the limited number of ICU beds in hospitals? How should doctors prioritize certain patients? Anyway, some terrific questions on that. And I would say that we're just going to have to get him back. But we're also interested in your suggestions on people who we could bring on to the town hall. And hopefully we will have more time with them. In the meantime, I'd like to just make some announcements and then also open up to questions about things related to post-Thanksgiving, spring semester, COVID testing after November 30th, and anything else that might be on your mind. I do want to make an announcement, though, that the Wellness Center has worked with the Truth and Tobacco, has put together a Truth and Tobacco survey that's ready to launch. And I just want to put a plug in for that'll either go out today or tomorrow. And this is being driven by Rochelle from the Wellness Center. And the survey is going to be critical in helping us get feedback and understanding on some of the following questions. You know, how's the policy, right? If we did 100% tobacco vape-free campus, how would that be looked at by our employees and students if it were to be in place? How would it impact employees and students that are on our campuses? And how would it help us understand specifically how vaping is viewed and what we needed to do to move forward in prevention efforts? We need actually about 350 completed surveys to reach a 95% confidence rating, and that needs to really come from both campuses. So I would really encourage everyone to complete that survey, and it's an anonymous survey. And if you want, there's a drawing apparently that you can enter into for participating. So listen, I'd like to sort of move to the issue of COVID since it's dominating our lives. But since we actually made an announcement, I think since the last time we were on here, that we were going to continue on with our face-to-face instruction after Thanksgiving. We're one of the very few institutions that are planning that, but we do have some spikes in the infection rate. So we are going to put in what we're calling a 10-day circuit breaker, which we will essentially the Friday before Thanksgiving, and then not come back, or we essentially go on remote learning for that Tuesday, Wednesday, and then back face-to-face that following Monday, the 30th. So we hope that is acceptable for, it's not ideal, but in order for us to really be able to confidently move forward for the rest of the semester, we think that we really need this circuit breaker. I'd like to bring in Rob Nielsen, who is really been leading our efforts on COVID care teams and sort of our COVID strategy. You may have seen from the governor's recent announcement that he would like all college students to be tested weekly as soon as possible. So that is a logistical challenge that we're still trying to get our hands around. And it's not likely that we're going to be able to have logistics to do that in the way that they initially thought or hoped would happen. But I'd like to bring in Rob Nielsen and talk to us a little bit about, as we've thought about this beginning on the 30th, how might that look like? What might that look like for our campus if we can actually get the tests? And that's not a surety, because we're facing some supply chain challenges with the actual test. But assuming that we have the test, Rob, what can the campus expect?
So we'd like to set up a few stations around the campus. We may do it in the Blue Gym, we may do it in the Greenwood Center, but we would have stations set up where students could come on their own and they would take a test. The test is relatively easy. It's very quick. You swab your nose, not all the way up to your brain, but just in the front there, and then you put that on a test strip, and it shows within 10 to 15 minutes whether you're positive or negative. So it would be a voluntary thing where students would come. We will be tracking the number of tests that we do. The state wants to know how many tests we do, how many are positive, how many are negative. So we will have to be tracking all of those. At the beginning, we will not be tracking you as individuals. It will just be a number for the state to know how many of our students. They would like every student to be tested. We recognize that you have rights and freedoms to not do that if you choose. So it's going to be something we will encourage you to do that. We've thought of different things. We've thought of a drawing we might have if everybody that puts in, and we draw for a part of a scholarship or something each week, or some things that motivate you to come and try and be tested. We'll be looking at some of those ideas. As President said, the challenge is going to be getting the tests and having enough tests. Right now, the state is set to receive 100,000 tests sometime, hopefully this week. They're in a warehouse and will be shipped. We don't know what percentage of those tests will come to Snow and how many we'll be able to have. So there's certain groups that will probably be tested more regularly. We'll probably do all of the athletes since they'll be competing in different things. We need to do that from a national standpoint. If there are other groups that want to be tested as a group, we'll be able to work with that group to go remotely or work with a group to go wherever they might want to be tested and work with you that way. So it's going to be a lot to do with the students, and we'll need your cooperation as we've had it your cooperation has been great so far. We currently have 35 cases, active cases on campus, which is 1% of our campus. And that was the first threshold that we were concerned about. We think we can go up to 3%, which would be about 100 cases. So hopefully over Thanksgiving, this number is going to go back down to a manageable amount. I think a very positive thing is our hospitalizations in the area. Currently, they are 13. That number hasn't changed really over the last several months. It's been very constant at about that number. So as the number of cases have spiked, the number of hospitalizations in our area has not spiked. And so that's a good thing, that we're not having people have to go to the hospital for this disease or this virus. We have had several people on campus who have been affected by it. And so it is something that we need to be concerned about, and doing our job in masking and doing the things that governor's asked us to do for this rest of this week and as we go into Thanksgiving. But overall, the campus is doing very well with their COVID reaction. And as we work with the state to try and find out the logistics of this, there are a couple of colleges that are doing, or universities that are ahead of us. And so we're going to be able to learn from them and see what's working for them and bring the best practices back to the college as we get ready for the 30th and those couple of weeks to learn how to do this as we prepare to have you face-to-face and testing in the spring, if that's what we continue to do.
Yeah. So one of the questions, of course, is, can staff and faculty kind of work remotely during those 10 days? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And just work that out with the supervisor. But we really want to have people kind of take a break. Now there is a question about the question is, it doesn't make sense to actually do the break now as opposed to coming back from Thanksgiving. The argument that we're actually making is we don't like where the numbers are going now. We're at 1%. We are at 35 cases. We've gone from 6 over a 10-day average to 19 to 35. Now that 35 has sort of steadied out, but we need to break that. We need to break that up. So then the idea is after Thanksgiving with these testing, the idea is that if we can identify and those that are infected and then isolate, that's going to be a much more powerful way to control the virus. So it really is a kind of a two-punch strategy here, a 10-day break, and then testing. Now, one thing that we acknowledge is that students are hesitant to possibly test, and this is we've got to and it's not just students. We also have faculty and staff that we'd like to have tested as well, so that we can identify those that might be asymptomatic and then we can isolate them and get them out of the kind of circulation pool. That's the idea. The other thing to point out is that while our hospitals beds are relatively still non-taxed in this area, it's important to know that a lot of these those that are sick are often transported to some of the urban hospitals, and those urban hospitals are filling up the ICU units and beds there. And so we've got to be very careful that we aren't that as soon as those urban hospitals get overtaxed, then those numbers, our hospital numbers, could be affected quite drastically. And one of the questions here, many of our really sick people get transferred to other hospitals in the city. Shouldn't we then look at overall hospital capacity, not just local? And that, I think, is the right way to look at that. Another question is, we signed a pledge to wear masks. Will there be a new pledge for next semester, and will it include the test be required like the masks are required? So we will, as you know, that the mask mandate we had was until the end of December. We anticipate that mask mandate will continue to be in place. We know it works. We know it slows things down. And in terms of the tests, we are to the extent that we have the tests, we are going to want everybody to be able to be tested weekly, if at all possible. So the question is, do we anticipate the test being optional in the spring semester as well? So I think that's a little far out for now to make that kind of commitment. We're still struggling, of course, with the logistics of actually getting the tests themselves. We think what we're being told by the state health officials is that the state has enough in their stores, in their supply, to last the state until the end of, or mid-December to end of December. But beyond that is still a big question mark. How is testing happening on the Richfield campus? So, Rob, do you want to address that? I don't think any testing is occurring at the moment, but how would you address that question?
So we're not testing on either campus at this time. Both campuses will start testing on the 30th, and we're working with Richfield to have an area there as well where they'll be giving their test in one of the buildings. And so it'll be the same on both campuses, that people will be allowed to, or areas will be made available for them to come and test. And again, it's mandated by the governor, and yet it's not. It's still kind of optional for the students. So both campuses will have the same opportunities for testing, and we'll be publishing where and how that will happen on both campuses as we get closer to the 30th. As you mentioned earlier, President, one interesting thing, the preliminary tests that people are doing, the infection rate for the non-symptomatic people is very low. It's about 1%. The symptomatic people are testing about 15 to 20%. So that's good news for us as a campus, to maybe the idea that the non-symptomatic carriers are passing this around a lot, or that we have a lot of them, isn't showing in the very preliminary testing done on campuses. But a lot more testing to be done, both on Richfield and Ephraim, as well as all the campuses, and we'll be following all of those and what they're doing.
Yeah, related to that is a comment here. They are not openly testing, that being students. The comment here is that they're openly not testing, hiding sickness, etc. We know this. We know for certain our numbers are significantly higher. Well, so back to what we're learning. When the testing mandate was about a week ago, and as Rob was saying, Utah State, University of Utah, Weber State have a jump, and Utah Valley have a jump on this testing, the testing protocol. And what we're finding is that if someone has symptoms, then it's right around a 20% positivity rate if they come in with symptoms. But the idea is for everybody to be tested was actually to try and test asymptomatics, faculty or staff or students that are asymptomatic. And what they're finding, and there is a sample now of almost 5,000, that the asymptomatic positivity is very low, like Rob said, about 1%, which, again, it's still too early to know for sure. but we were assuming that we have a lot of asymptomatic people on our campus that are unintentionally and unknowingly spreading the virus. And that's not quite how it's playing out with the numbers just now. I think we still need to let it play out, but that actually is an encouraging sign. Let's see another question, a comment here. Oh, he says include more city mayors in the area, commissioners, employers for future guests, people who can help students bridge the gaps in towns and gown and feel successful in their community dealings. That's a terrific suggestion, to be able to see maybe even industry leaders that could be a part of this, so that we're making these kind of connections. That's good. A question here, if one campus is forced to go online, will both campuses have to go online? So let me be clear here that we're not anticipating going online. We really are planning on being face-to-face. But if the worst happens, it would be evenly administered between both campuses in terms of that mandate. Here's a good question, I think, that Rob can help me maybe respond to. How does being home for 10 days slow the spread among our students? It seems that it would have more people in contact with others who are at their homes. Any thoughts on that question? I've got some initial thoughts, but how would you respond?
Part of the idea was that, yes, you'll be dealing with those people, but we hope that it will be contained with that 10 days to where you'll just be with that group of people, your family members. And whether you're there for 3 days or 10 days or 5 days, we think that having that 10-day window away from campus and people isolating and masking and doing the things the governor's asked should be able to help us as a campus in the long run. It's true that there's going to be a lot of contacts, and people have got to decide how they're going to handle Thanksgiving. There'll be a lot of family and different people coming in. Some people are masking, some people are limiting the number of people at their Thanksgiving parties. So I think it's all an individual thing as far as taking care of yourself and your family, and what you feel is important as far as what level of masking you do and what level of COVID response you have as individuals. And together as individuals, that will determine what our community and what our school does over the next several months.
Let me emphasize that this mask thing should not really be a debate. This is really not a personal infringement issue. This really is about, protecting others. So we need to be very serious about that, and be sober-minded as citizens and community members. We actually, as Rob said, we actually have colleagues and friends on this campus that have lost loved ones. They are suffering. They are they are mourning, and we've got to make sure that we're willing to make that small sacrifice for the lives and health of others. If I could actually bring Josh into this next question. The comment is, thanks for the meeting, and if you haven't covered this already, what help will students or hourly workers get, if any, if they test and are positive? If they are positive, how are they supposed to get by financially? Is there any financial support or unemployment insurance for student jobs and other hourly employees? That's a very good question. Josh, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, based on federal law, all employees, whether they're full-time, part-time, are eligible for the emergency sick leave. That's part of our policy. You can find the details on the policy website. It's the FFCRA leave policy. But really, what that means is if you're advised to quarantine by the health department, you are going to get some paid time for that. So if that happens, contact Bonnie or Linda in our office to kind of get the paperwork and get that leave approved.
Good. Well, thank you. And also, one of the questions, during that 10-day kind of remote, all we're really doing is essentially just 2 days of online. That's all we're really doing. But we're building on those weekends to get 10 days. What would you say to employees and supervisors about skeletal staffing during those days, and what would you say about that?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, we are still going to be holding class and we are still going to be serving students. So offices will need to remain open, but at the same time, in the spirit of kind of getting this 10-day circuit breaker, we do want employees to be working from home if they can. So really, that's something that you'll want to work with your supervisor and kind of work out schedules so that we have enough staff around to take care of our students. But to the extent that's taken care of, and people want or need to work from home, we definitely encourage that.
One of the comments here is that, and then we are bringing them all back here to our county, all for 4 to 6 classes. Us being the exception, having face-to-face classes after Thanksgiving is not ideal. We are the exception for a reason. And Melanie, can I bring you in on this? Let me just say that that I received a very lengthy petition by students to actually be back face-to-face after Thanksgiving. And so we know that's what students want, and we actually think this is what's probably pedagogically best. But Melanie, how would you say this? I think the concern here, and that's a legitimate concern, is that, are we essentially bringing people back to campus, and they're going to be bringing back with them, this virus? How do you balance that out in terms of the safety versus student care and pedagogy?
Well, it's a very complicated issue, and I think all of us have opinions about what the right thing to do is without having all of the information available to us. But pedagogically, I would argue pedagogically that the end of the semester is when students typically need the most support and the most help, and that's where we saw them flounder terribly spring semester. The students are begging for contact, for support, for help from their faculty as they complete out the semester. And hopefully we will educate students on what this 10-day, when you go home for 10 days, it's not, hey, let's go shopping at the mall and let's go all over town and catch what we can catch. It's, hey, you're going to go home anyway, so let's extend the time that you're going home and sort of hunker down, get through any symptoms that we might have, and then come back with fewer cases. So that's what we're hoping for. We've been talking a lot about this in Dean's Council. We've been talking about it in Cabinet, and we know that some students will have difficulty coming back or attending face-to-face, and so we're trying to make sure everybody understands the technology, they can utilize the technology, and can provide support for students if they're not able to be here. But the students are telling us over and over that they need this. And I did read a couple of comments, 4 to 6 classes, but if you have 4 to 6 classes and 4 to 6, dates of class that you have to come back to, that adds up exponentially for students. So it's bigger for students than it feels maybe to some of us. So it's complicated, and hopefully, we'll be making the right move. So.
Well, we also know that even though we are planning on that during the post-Thanksgiving, we also have to be agile enough that if the numbers aren't turning around in any significant way, we may have to go to remote learning to the end of the semester. But until, as of right now, we continue to feel like it's managed in terms of the quarantining, in terms of the isolation, in terms of supporting students now, even with 35 cases. Now, if it gets if it gets up to closer to 3%, then that changes the whole calculus for sure. Please continue to ask questions this way. And one suggestion was about following what the University of Utah has done in terms of their testing. We plan on we will put all the instructions, on social media, and we'll include all the employees once we get the tests. And we'll try and make that as very clear, as easy as we can. Luckily, we again have other campuses that are ahead of us that are doing as many as 400 tests a day that we can learn from. That does mean we're going to bring on some additional help to do this and some additional training to do it safely. So question is, what is your metric for going remote after Thanksgiving? Is it 3%? So I would say we're looking at the trends. If we end up going from 35, that's and about 100 is about 3% of our campus. If we double, even if we double, we're going to be really on high alert to see if we can. And if it gets much higher than that, it's we really are going to have to pivot. So I think that it's not an exact science, but as you can see in our daily count, we have sort of a graduated sort of color scale that once we get into that red zone, we feel it's going to be very difficult to manage this safely. If there are really serious concerns that you have, please come to us, talk to us, and see if we can alleviate those concerns here on campus. So let's see, there was a question. Let's scroll down all the way to the bottom there. This comment is, my classes are at 30% attendance this week. I'm not sure that all students actually want or can attend in person. I think you're right. I think that, but what we are finding from really the kind of the petition, as well as we've talked to faculty who have put this question to their classes, the vast majority want to continue the option of having having face-to-face. So Rob, here's a question. But we know the college is currently monitoring around 160 folks. Is that right?
That's correct. And that means people who have either been tested or being tested or have symptoms. If someone calls would have symptoms, so that number has stayed about the same percentage-wise as the number of cases. So there's about 140, 150 people, students that we are monitoring to see, but that number stayed pretty consistent along with what we've been testing and what we've been doing. So that's part of why we think a 10-day break will maybe get that number down to where we are able to deal with the people that are actually doing it. Testing will help with that as well. We have people that will come in with symptoms and we tell them to wait, and so then we monitor them for a week or so, whereas now we'll be able to test them right off and give them a little bit clearer indication of what they need to do. One interesting thing the state is doing as far as contact tracing is they're looking at reducing the number of days that you would quarantine if someone you contacted would go from 14 days to 7 days, more like the elementary schools and middle schools. So between now and the 30th, and between the 30th and January 11th, there will be many more changes. So that's one thing we have to continue to do as a group, is to be adaptable and to see that this thing changes, and we have to just go with the flow and kind of do the best we can with the information that we have at the current time.
So Rob, weigh in on this, because this is a dynamic that we have to take seriously, and that is that if we were to just announce, for example, that we weren't going to be coming back after Thanksgiving, that actually sends a real message to students and makes them very unsettled about what to do with about their housing for spring. This is what happened last May, right? That part of this was about being able to help students feel confident about whether they're going to come back to college at all in the spring. What would you say about that in terms of this was also a dynamic that we learned, or a lesson we learned, is that once that sort of happens, there ends up becoming all kinds of complicated questions related to, for them anyway, about, my housing contract, what's my housing contract going to look like? Should I just drop out for, the next semester? What's you're kind of on the front line dealing with a lot of these students and these questions. What would you say about that?
So with our housing and our food services plan, since we've gone to a swipe, I think the worst case scenario is we would close in December. And then if we did that, I think we would do the same as we did last year. We'd refund like we did. A lot of people didn't refund, off campus didn't refund, but we feel like refunding to the students was the right thing to do. And we think that was a positive thing. The second scenario would be that we would be both on campus and remote, and you would have the choice to come on campus and take your classes or to stay at home. If we did that, then we think that we would be providing the services that we said we would. And so we probably wouldn't refund. If you wanted to go home, you could go home. You would have that choice, or you could be in face to face. Or the best case scenario is we stay as we are and we'll be face to face for everything. And I think that's what we're hoping for. That's what many of the students hope for. And so I think those are kind of the three scenarios we deal with. If we close and we say, or we tell people that we're going to be online and that's your choice, then we would look at refunding housing and meal plans. If it's your choice, then we would probably look at a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, we wouldn't be refunding those because those services would still be available to you. If spring happens, and we're encouraging everyone to stay with their contracts. If worst case scenario, we will work with you to do what is best for you. And if it's refunding the money for face or non-face-to-face, we want to do that because we know that's the right thing to do and would be best for the students.
So another question is, can a student report a roommate with symptoms to the COVID team, or does the student have to self-report?
The student needs a self-report. We have had cases where people have told us of other people, and we will follow up with them and talk to them. There's nothing we can mandate them to do, but we do follow up. If that happens, we've had several cases where students have had roommates, and so we do follow up with them and talk to the roommate and kind of see what their plans are and encourage them to get tested or to report themselves. So I think it's fine to do that, and we encourage people to be responsible to themselves and especially to their roommates. So if you're concerned, please contact the COVID care team and we will follow up with them, both people.
So as a question, will there be a university campaign to encourage people to self-report COVID symptoms, diagnoses? It seems likely the reported numbers aren't an accurate reflection of actual infection rates because many aren't self-reporting. How would you answer that one, Rob?
I think that's the same with our communities. That's kind of, I think, what we're doing as a people. I think if we were to test every person in the state, I think our rates would jump up. Just the more you test, the more you're going to find out. The asymptomatic question is an interesting one. And if that's not as high as we thought, then maybe we're closer to knowing where we are really if the symptoms are the ones that are positive. So I think it's human nature to challenge things and to fight things and not want to be told what to do. And so I think that with COVID, we're learning a lot about us as people and as a community and what's going to happen and how we deal with this. And so I agree there's more cases out there than we know of, both at the campus and off campus. And I think that's just something we're dealing with, and that's what's causing these spikes. And it's all going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next 3 to 6 months. I had one person tell me that they're projecting the highest spike would be in March, but you can find out anything you want, I think, as far as COVID goes right now. There's so many things that we don't know about it that we're still trying to learn and gain as we study and learn from the people that are supposed to know all of this stuff.
So a question here is, what kind of mask enforcement is going to happen at spring sporting events? At the few events that we've had so far, it seems that once the patrons are in the facilities, their masks come off.
These are great questions. We think it's important that people mask up, and where we're mandate things, we're dealing with this in the activity center right now. The masks are mandated to work out. We went up last night and there was probably 30, 35 people working out, 8 to 10 people not wearing masks. Well, we ask them to wear a mask and they say yes, and then we turn around and we come back 5 minutes later and their masks are off. How do we mandate? And that's a real question of what we do with people's freedoms. And so do we have a masking and a no mask section? There's a lot of options we can have as how we deal with this, but it really comes down to individuals and how we as a community, and are we going to help each other and encourage each other to mask up, or do we just get mad and report them to somebody, and then we try and start mandating things and enforcing things? It becomes very difficult. So we will encourage masking as we do at all of our events, and depending on how this thing flows, it may limit the number of people that come. And if people choose not to mask and it's a mandate, then we'll probably not allow people to come to events, is what it would end up being.
Another question is, can students that are now currently learning remotely come and get tested? My suggestion is, I don't think we'll turn anybody away. I think though that if you're off campus, stay off campus. If if you're choosing to do that, so we kind of limit where we can. But our sense is that that people that want to come and get tested, we're going to try because the idea is if we can identify, then we can isolate. If we isolate, then then we can reduce that infection.
One thing
we're getting near the end of the hour here. Another suggestion for a guest is Angela Dunn. I think that's terrific. I hadn't thought about that, but she's really been in the eye of the storm on this whole thing. I think we'll make a note of that. Any sort of final words, Rob, on COVID? Any advice in terms of self-care, in terms of any sort of insight for the next, especially as we go into colder weather? People are going to be closer, and that's a real concern for all of us.
A couple of things that we're learning for people's well-being and their health is to get outside and exercise. Don't sit inside. Get outside, and even in the cold air, cold weather, it's important that people are out doing things on your own, hiking. That's what they're finding, that it will help in a lot of ways if people get out and exercise and do things, rather than just sitting in their home and convalescing. So activity is important, and doing things by yourself or with someone close to you that you're able to not share the virus with, or you are. But I think that's one thing that we need to do is not just sit in our homes, but get out and get active. The other thing that we'd probably mention is the faculty and staff are also being encouraged to be tested weekly. And so that will be available for the faculty and staff as well. So get out to do things. Don't let it ruin your life, and still enjoy life and be happy and make the best of the difficult situation.
Let me bring in Melanie for some last words here related to academic stuff. A question here about attendance guidelines for spring.
Right. So we've learned a lot this semester, right? We didn't know what this semester would look like. It was all so foreign and unknown to us, and we just said, hey, be flexible. And no doubt some students are taking advantage of that, but other students have legitimate need. So we're learning, and the deans are working on some guidelines for spring semester of what you might put in your syllabus for an attendance policy, what you might expect in terms of remote learning and how this supports and helps students. So the deans are working on that. They'll be communicating that with you. I think we've learned a lot this semester for sure.
Another question is, can faculty teach remotely after Thanksgiving if they want? So
we've promised students face-to-face. There might be some some situations where faculty have different needs, and we're just asking them to speak with us and make some arrangements if they need to. So.
And then people a question here is about whether we will have the pledge again for spring. You might remember we did a Badger pledge, and my sense is that if you think that is effective, I think we could do that. I think we are going to have we definitely are going to have a mask mandate until we can kind of understand where we are with the vaccination. And where this goes. I just don't think that's an area we can compromise on a bit. Another thing we're learning is that the infections that are happening less on campus, from what we can gather from the other institutions, than it is about casual social settings. And so one thing to be very careful about with Thanksgiving for everybody is this may be a very unorthodox Thanksgiving, but if you are gathering with family and loved ones, make sure that you're taking adequate precautions, because that apparently is where most of the recent infections, are happening. We've got to stay vigilant, and this continues to be a very serious situation. Well, listen, if there's not any other questions related to that, can I get a quick update from Terry Clausen on retention and enrollment? One thing that we're paying a lot more attention to, of course, is our, how effective are we in getting students from point A, the starting line, to the finish line? And so how are we looking for spring semester? Even with all of the uncertainty out there, Terry, and then what are some of the preliminary signs related to next fall?
Yeah, happy to share. So yeah, we have been doing some things this year that we haven't been able to do before, just due to some technology, which I'm really thrilled that we have at our disposal now. But we, for spring, our new incoming students are about the same as we saw last year. This is really just, I know it's oversaid and overstated, but it's unprecedented times. We really can't use historical data to give us any indication of what potentially might happen. But looking at our numbers for spring, incoming students were looking okay. But we've been really focusing on retention. And so as everybody's talked about this face-to-face aspect, we're also looking at it from an academic standpoint with our advisors and making sure that students are registering and coming back for spring. We've been monitoring that. We only looked like we had about a 60% persistence rate, and that's jumped up over 70 in the past couple of weeks. And we've got a couple of initiatives going on by our advisors and others to reach out to these students to get them here. For fall, it's a double-edged sword. One, we're up in our admits almost 1,000. Woohoo, that sounds really great, but here's the kicker. We're down in applications overall. So that means either we're really efficient in getting those students admitted, and we just are kind of seeing what others are seeing across the state, is that this current senior class for the incoming fall is, they don't know what to do, much like we don't know what to do. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm not planning a vacation anytime soon because I just don't know what's going to happen. And I think a lot of students are facing that. We're hoping that that will change and we'll start to see some increases in the spring, but we are still pushing forward as using everything that we can to get those students here. So that's where we're at.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Terry, and your team for all that you're doing. And thanks to everybody. Really, everybody is working so hard. There's a lot of stress on campus, and we acknowledge that. And what we as an administration are working on is finding ways in which we can give back to some days to you. And we're going to work on this tomorrow at Cabinet. and make an official announcement so that we can give maybe the gift of time so you don't have to take some vacation. We'll give you more details later, but we really do feel that in terms of self-care, part of this is really being able to find time with your family, find time to exercise, find time to sort of de-stress, and find time to get away from maybe the stresses of our jobs. So we'll come back to you on that, but we promise that we will find some days in which we can give to you. One of the questions, and I'm gonna give the final word to Carson Howell because he's very zen. The question is, what is the most effective way to live life through this pandemic? And maybe it's because he's from Idaho, or maybe he's a devotee of Star Wars and the Force is with him. I'm not sure. But what is your secret, Dr. Howell, of living life abundantly through COVID?
Boy, that's a good question. You know, it's we take family drives. We play a lot of board games as a family. But yeah, trying to get out as much as possible, and it gives us an opportunity to go and check out a lot of the natural wonders that we have around here in Ephraim and Richfield, and beautiful area that we live in. And it's a great opportunity to go out and check that out. So at least that's what we're trying to do. And I eat a lot of M&Ms.
M&Ms. Yeah, M&Ms are really a good answer for so many things. Listen, I want to just say thank you for being a part of this. Our next meeting is going to be on December 15th, Tuesday, December 15th, and we'll work on a couple of these suggestions on visitors. Listen, please let us know. We're always open for feedback and kind of continual improvement. But even with all of this, this uncertainty, this college is strong, and this college is strong because of you, but it's because of the collective strength that I'm hoping that you can draw on your colleagues and friends for support. And so take care of each other. We hope that you have a terrific Thanksgiving next week. It is next week, I think. I've lost all sense of time. But keep our students in mind, keep yourself safe, and thanks very much.